Welcome to another edition of Pioneer Valley Life. I'm your host, James Sullivan. We're here in Easthampton at the eMedia Studios. Today, my guest is Glenn Siegel. Welcome, Glenn.
Thank you for having me.
Sure.
It's a pleasure.
I'll read a few little notes that I made off of your website. Glenn runs a program called Pioneer Valley Jazz Shares. And a little blurb here, Glenn Siegel has produced hundreds of concerts throughout Western Massachusetts. He founded the Magic Triangle Jazz Series at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in 1990, which he directed until 2020. And for 12 years, he produced A World of Piano for the Northampton Center for the Arts. He served as manager of WMUA-FM at UMass for 28 years, where he hosted Jazz in Silhouette and was designated a jazz hero by the Jazz Journalists Association in 2019. He co-founded Pioneer Valley Jazz Shares in 2012 and serves as president.
That's all accurate.
Oh, good. Good. Well, the concept of jazz shares is really interesting. And just a little bit based on the community-supported agriculture, CSA, or farm share model, where stakeholders ensure the success of the farm by prepaying for food. Members purchase jazz shares to provide the capital needed to produce concerts with minimal institutional support. So how did you come up with that concept?
Well, I am a longtime farm share member. I'm actually part of Mountain View Farm here in Easthampton, Massachusetts.
Yep.
And I produced roughly 6 concerts a year over my career at UMass, the Magic Triangle series. And I was getting many more requests from artists that I loved and respected. And I kept having to say no to a lot of them, which was very frustrating for me. And so I started thinking about ways to bring more jazz activity to the valley. And so it just hit me that the farm share model, where a community comes together to support the farmer, might work for cultural production as well. And so I refined the idea with my wife and co-founder, Priscilla Page, and eventually in the summer of 2012, over 2 evenings, invited roughly 70 people to our house. These are friends, people that I've met through producing concerts and my work on the radio, people I knew to be seriously invested in jazz and music in general, and pitched the idea. We all sat in a circle in our backyard over 2 evenings, and I forwarded the idea, and people were very enthusiastic about it. In fact, David Gowler, who is the first president of River Valley Market, the co-op in Northampton and Easthampton, and also one of the founders of Valley Free Radio, he moved to after the spiel, he moved to the center of the circle, threw down his $125, and we had our first share sold. And from there, we went public, and we've been going ever since. We're starting our 12th season in a week from today, in fact.
Yeah. Now, I know people can go to your website and see the schedule of shows that really go from September to June, I think, basically.
They do, yeah. So in the beginning, we were doing 1 show a month on average, so 10 shows in a season. And now that we've grown a bit and have more shareholders, and more business sponsorships, we're doing 22 shows this year, which is the most we've ever done.
Yeah, because you are it says that you're a grassroots all-volunteer organization.
That is true. So I'm the president, and I work for no money, and my wife Priscilla Page is the vice president, and she works for no money, and so on. So we have we incorporated in 2017 as a 501c3. But yes, we're all volunteers making it happen.
That's great, yeah. because there's a big music scene in the Pioneer Valley, but probably from my point of view, jazz probably is a little bit below some of the other genres that but over time, the number of venues has been changing. Everything used to revolve around the Iron Horse for a long time.
Right.
But now with Bombyx, the Drake, and I noticed you have a variety of venues where your shows are put on, anywhere from Springfield into Holyoke and all around. So how did that come about? How did you approach these venues and have them agree to have your shows?
Yeah, well, at the beginning, I mean, that was always a sort of bedrock concept for us to move around the valley. So we're, over the course of our 11 years, we've been in 21 different venues throughout Hampshire, Franklin, and Hampden counties.
Yeah.
So that was always important to us.
Yeah.
In part to spread the wealth, because we have shareholders in all three counties, and also to bring people out of their comfort zone. So it's really nice to hear concert goers, go to the community music school in Springfield, for instance, for the first time, and be wowed by how beautiful that space is. And it also spreads the wealth. So, many of our shareholders go early and eat dinner at various restaurants in different towns. So we're spreading the wealth that way as well. In the beginning, I knew a lot of these venues just from having lived in the Valley since 1980. And I know some of the people who run those venues. But we sort of did a tour. A friend of ours showed us around Holyoke, for instance, at the beginning. And we visited various venues. So, part of it is, do they meet our requirements as far as space, price for rent? And we love moving around. And each venue has pluses and minuses. Some have pianos, some don't. Some of our bands have pianists and some don't. So we, try to match bands and venues.
Yeah.
So it's a nice puzzle to put together.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No, that way, like you say, spreading it throughout the valley. It is the Pioneer Valley, and it's a big area. Road goes a long ways. You're driving down the road, and sometimes you'll see that sign entering the Pioneer Valley.
Right.
In all sorts of places. And luckily, there are still, COVID hit into the venue market for a while, but I think it's making a good comeback now.
Yeah, I mean, our audience is, when we resumed live in-person concerts, our attendance was a little below pre-pandemic levels, and it seems like they're starting to come back.
Right.
But that's sort of the beauty of the Jazz Shares model. We don't have to sweat, how many people show up for a particular concert, because we already have the money in the bank, so to speak. So we do sell single tickets to the general public, so you don't have to be a shareholder to come to a concert. You can just walk in off the street and pay for a single ticket. But because we have the support of 100 to 120 shareholders and a solid business sponsorship, if there's an uptick in COVID, for instance, or a particular rainy night, we don't have to worry that only 15 or 30 or 40 people show up, because we already have the money in the bank. And that point was illustrated quite vividly this summer as far as the farm community.
Yes, exactly.
Mountain View Farm, where I'm a member, they were devastated by the July floods and lost a lot of their crop. But they already had my money up front, and so we're sharing the risk and we're sharing the reward. So. Right.
Yeah, I live at the Treehouse community here in Easthampton, and we have 2 shares at that same farm. And there's been something available for most of the time. Not everything that might have been available last year.
Right.
But it's not only them, but I mean all the farmers in the valley, anywhere near any kind of body of water.
Sure.
Total devastation for a lot of these people. Luckily, the government has kicked in some money.
Right.
Hopefully, some of them had insurance. So, but it's an unexpected, I'm sure, happenstance for them.
Yeah. Well, probably more to come in that regard.
Right. That's a subject for another
right.
show.
Yeah. Right. But yeah, so that's the beauty of that model is that the community is sharing the risk and the reward.
Right. Because I think it says that you, like you said, you've got between 100 and 120 members. You sell full shares, you sell half shares, but the full share is limited to 10 shows. Is that correct?
Yes. So yeah, a full share, which costs $125, entitles you to 10 admissions. So we give folks little cards that we hole punch for each admission, and half share is half the price and half the number of admissions. So some of our members come to virtually every show, so they end up buying an additional share, you know, once we're halfway through the season.
So you can buy an additional share instead of, you know, so what is your average walk in the door price for the shows?
$15. So buying a share, you save, you know, it works out to be $12.50 a show. So you're saving a little money that way. But
I mean, the object is to, like you say, get the money up front, which protects you under lots of different circumstances that may arise.
Right. And it also enables us to guarantee artists, you know, set, you know, guaranteed artist fees. And, you know we can pay venues and hotels and so forth. Right.
And, because you said you've got 22 shows coming up this season. That's a lot.
It is a lot, yeah. It's, you know, since I retired from UMass, you know, I have more time on my hands and I'm not doing those 6 concerts. So, and, you know, as word spreads among the musician community, you know, I get solicited more and more from people who are going to be in the Northeast or touring, and would we be willing to host them? So there's so many great musicians working today that it's easy to program, frankly.
Yeah, and I've noticed, you know, I'm not a huge jazz fan, but you know, most people would probably know some of the top level names in jazz, but your series exposes people to some that they may never have heard of, but yet they are professional musicians performing in other cities or whatever, and coming here, bringing them here to Western Massachusetts is a big deal. Yeah.
No, these are, I always say, you know, these are world-class musicians. These are people who have won MacArthur Genius Grant Awards and Doris Duke Awards and are NEA Jazz Masters, and some of them are young and starting their careers and haven't, you know, achieved all those accolades, but these are world-class musicians who have recordings and websites and are very well known within the jazz community. And of course, the jazz world, jazz is, you know, no longer America's popular music like it was in the 30s and into the 40s. So a lot of shareholders, a lot of our audience does not know who these people are going into it. And that's sort of another wonderful thing about Jazz Shares, is they trust my curatorial vision. And it's like a farm share. You know, you go to the farm share and you pick, and you're given all these rutabagas. Like, what's a rutabaga? What do I do with this? So people learn how to cook and appreciate rutabaga and radicchio. You know, all these vegetables that they might not be super familiar with. And so we're making fans along the way. We're expanding audience for these artists.
Yeah. And you're also, you know, the audience is getting exposed to musicians that maybe they heard them on the radio somewhere, maybe. But a lot of times maybe they've never heard of them themselves. You know?
I mean, that's one of the, you know, dilemmas for the jazz world. It's not in the popular press. It's hardly on the radio. So how do you learn about all these great jazz artists unless you're specifically looking for it?
Right.
You could easily traipse through your life and never encounter a living, breathing jazz musician.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. But UMass, I know they had you had the ones that you ran, but they had the Jazz in July series for quite a few years as well.
So UMass has a really rich history of jazz performance, education. Max Roach and Archie Shepp and Yusef Lateef, Reggie Workman, all these legends have been on faculty, Billy Taylor, Fred Tillis. So there's a really rich history of jazz at UMass, which I was part of, and it even preceded me. I mean, starting in the 1970s, actually, when the African American Music Department formed and a jazz curriculum formed, and the Afro-Am Studies Department formed. There was a lot of activity on campus, both through the Fine Arts Center, and then Jazz in July is a summer 2-week intensive teaching situation with some concerts attached to it. So yeah, UMass has been a driver of jazz activity in the Valley for a long time.
Yeah, I always thought that was an amazing step for them to take, to all of a sudden notice that these, in certain circles, well-known jazz musicians were given faculty positions. So that was just another means of support for these musicians, where they didn't have to depend on touring or recording or whatever.
Yeah.
So I thought that was a really interesting thing for them to do.
Yeah, it really put UMass on the map nationally within the jazz world, but also academically.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I might say that, given the state of the jazz economy, such as it is, almost every jazz musician that I know has some other means of support. Many teach either privately or through institutions, or have other day gigs to make ends meet.
They have to.
Well, if you live in New York especially, it's imperative.
Yeah. It's the place to live, to have the exposure to the clubs, but the expense of living there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, like you say, you had connections in the business for many years, and is that how you, like you say, you do get solicited occasionally, but are there certain people that you search out and try to, get them to come here?
Yeah, actually, rarely do I solicit an artist at this point. When I worked at UMass, my budgets were a little larger, so I could reach out and say, hey, would you like to bring this project to UMass? Jazz Shares is more of a bare bones operation, and so our artist fee is fairly modest, and it's pretty well set at around $1,000. So if it's a quartet or quintet, that doesn't go very far.
Right.
So almost always I'm getting solicited to put the Jazz Share seasons together. So rarely do I reach out cold and ask somebody. I mean, many musicians have become friends over the years, and so if I have a relationship with someone, I'll reach out. But more often than not, people are contacting me saying, "Can you host our band?"
Right. If they're on, their manager or whoever is putting together a tour of some kind.
Exactly.
And so a stop here in Western Massachusetts. Depending upon the day of the week, maybe on the weekend they might be in Boston or somewhere else, but it really helps them fill in to pay expenses.
Yeah, exactly. So that's often what happens. There's a really wonderful club in New Haven called Firehouse 12, which covers a lot of the same aesthetic ground that we do. So oftentimes musicians will say, oh, I'm going to be at Firehouse 12 on Friday. You want to do a concert on Thursday or Saturday. And then Boston, there's some activity in Portland, Maine, and New York Capital Region or the Hudson Valley.
Right.
So.
And there's a new place in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, Jimmy's Jazz.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've never been there, but from what I gather, it's kind of a high-end club.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it means that, there are places to play.
Yeah.
This time of year, there's festivals.
Mm-hmm.
There's 2 festivals coming up this coming weekend here in September.
Mm-hmm.
And outdoor shows, subject to the weather, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The indoor shows in the winter could be subject to weather.
Yeah. Right.
But like you say, you've got a guarantee there that says whatever might happen, the show will go on.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And the valley is very well situated geographically. As you mentioned, 2 hours from Boston, 3 hours from New York. So musicians have come up and just come to the valley, done a show, and then gone home.
Yeah.
So it's
Right.
doable.
Right. Because I think there was, I know there was a jazz venue at the bowling alley in Northampton for quite a while. I don't know if they still do that. But
no, that's the Green Street Trio. Paul
right,
Slaney and John Fisher and George Kay were there every Tuesday for a long time, and before that they were at the Clarion Hotel, which got knocked down in Northampton, and before that they were at the Green Street Cafe on Green Street in Northampton. So they've moved around, and now they're at the Drake a couple of times a month. But that bowling alley venue doesn't exist for jazz anymore. Yeah,
the Drake, that's a new venue. I was a patron of the old Drake many years ago, so it's kind of funny to see that name carried on the way it's carried on.
Yeah. In fact, we have Jazz Shares is going to be in 2 new venues this year, and one of them is the Drake. So we're going to do a show there in December and another one in late April or early May. So we're excited about being there because Amherst is one of the towns we haven't really been in much. In the early years, we did some concerts at Hampshire College, but there really wasn't any place to play outside of the colleges in Amherst.
Right, that's true.
Before the Drake opened. So I've been there as a patron. It's a really nice nightclub feel with great piano and good sound. So we're really anxious to be there. Yeah,
no, that's great. It's great that exists. I know, are you doing anything at the Wisteria Hearst Museum this year?
Yeah, we're going to be there November 4th, as a matter of fact, with a trio led by the great alto player named Tim Byrne. We've been there over the years.
Yeah, that's an interesting venue.
We love it there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they have a very nice piano, and it's their music room is quite elegant, and it's a little loud, because of all the marble on the wall. But for the right on, so again, as I mentioned earlier about matching band and venue.
I see. Yeah.
So we're presenting a trio without drums and without bass. It's accordion, cello, and saxophone. So that should work quite well in that space.
Well, that's interesting that you mentioned that. They're trying to match the setup of the group with the venue, because certain places might not be good for sound and others might not. So matching those two is quite an interesting concept.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a puzzle, putting a puzzle together.
Yeah.
But we have enough potential venues that it always works out.
Yeah. So it's, like you say, it's a volunteer effort, but I'm sure it's quite time consuming.
It is, and now that I'm retired from UMass, I have the time, and it's something I really love to do. I mean, this is my life's work, and and these musicians I respect so much, and so I want to do right by them, and so it's a labor of love.
Yeah. No, that's good. In our supposed golden years, or whatever they call them these days, it's nice to have something to do like that. You're giving back to the community, which has, in a sense, supported you over the years.
Exactly. Yeah, it's my community service.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So, And I'll mention the other new venue that we're going to be using for the first time is Holyoke Media, which just opened 6 or 8 months ago.
Right.
And they have a beautiful black box theater in their facility, which is, beautifully lit and has good sound and video capability, of course.
Yeah.
And so we're going to be doing a few shows there as well. So we're excited about that.
Yeah, they built it from scratch, really.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
Yeah. I had met Scott McPherson when he was up in Greenfield.
Yeah.
And took them a while to get going, but it looks like they really, made a lot of progress there.
Yeah. So we're actually going to be doing a panel discussion and music demonstration there too. We got a grant from the New England Foundation for the Arts to do a concert featuring Michelle Rosewoman and New Yoruba Ensemble. So this is an 11-piece ensemble that includes a full bata section. The bata is the sacred drums of Cuba, and with antecedents to Africa, of course. There are two-headed drums, and there's 3 sizes. So it has a full bata section, plus singing and Afro-Cuban religious chants to the Orishas. So we're doing that concert in Springfield at the Community Music School. And then that afternoon we're doing a panel discussion and demonstration at Holyoke Media around the religious aspect of the music.
Yeah, I've noticed that Bombix, as well as presenting musical events, has some community discussion type events that they're doing in their space.
Yeah.
Now that they've kind of are back in business.
Yes, that was a little precarious for a while with the city, but I think they've figured that out.
Right.
And we've done a few shows at Bombex in the past. We can't afford to work there anymore. Their fee is too high for our budget.
Right.
But I love the effort, and it's a beautiful space.
Yeah. I haven't been there myself. I still haven't gotten out to attending music indoors. I'd like to, but I used to it all the time. But for different reasons, it's
And during the depths of the pandemic, we had, we were checking vaccines and required masks. So those have been relaxed, but percentage of our people wear masks during the concert.
They still do, yeah. That's it's an individual decision these days. Yeah. Well, so for people who want to learn more about Pioneer Valley Jazz Shares, they can go to jazzshares.org.
That's it.
And they'll find a lot of information. They'll find this coming season's complete lineup all the way through June.
It's not quite complete. I mean, on the website we have our concerts listed through March.
Okay.
And then we have a few more in April, May, and June, which I haven't. We're still working out some final dates and stuff for the tail end of the season, so that's not up. But the first, probably 18 shows are up.
Right.
And then you can get a lot more information about Jazz Shares at our website.
Buying a share and what it's all about, what the business is about.
You can buy the share on the website. You can get some history and some articles and videos about Jazz Shares. So it's pretty complete.
So that's jazzshares.org. My guest today has been Glenn Siegel. Thanks very much for being here.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you, James.